Hey guys, today we're going to paint a Christmas cactus, Decemberist, together. I painted this flower from life on a small format, and now I'm going to try it on a larger one, copying the drawing I did before. I really loved the composition I managed to capture. Yeah, a bit of vanity, I know. But I'll also share with you how I thought about it when picking the composition for this little flower. There's a lot to this flower, but what really caught my attention was the beauty of how it blooms. Instead of drawing the whole pot of flowers, I wanted to focus on just a few branches with flowers. I loved the delicate, winding branches and the light, airy feel of the blossoms. So I chose a few branches that stood out to me. One flower is fully open, another a bit more closed, and there's a bud hiding in the background. I positioned all three flowers in a triangle shape on the page to balance them. I also added a second bud nearby to even out the mass. Sure, I could have left just one, but I wanted that second softer bud in there as well. The branches flow like a waterfall from the top corner down, creating this intertwined, cascading feeling. It's a common technique, often seen in Chinese paintings where branches or elements come out from the corner. Here, the branches flow down from the top corner, guiding the eye. It's a simple, yet powerful composition that helps direct movement. Now, when drawing the petals, leaves and stems, don't feel like you have to overdefine every single detail. With the brush, just hint at the shapes, and the brush itself will create the texture. But make sure to give them their correct direction, so they flow naturally. I don't sketch everything in detail right away. I recommend doing the same. Sometimes you can't see the full composition when you work in pencil. When you add the colour, you'll notice where you need more space, or where it's too crowded. So let the shapes and movements be your guide. The main direction here is the waterfall, and it helps the composition feel alive and flowing. The flowers are the main focus, but the greenery in the background adds another layer of depth. So we're moving on to the frontmost part now. When we start painting the colour, I'll also go into more detail about it. As for the shape of the petals, it'll be easier if I just send you a photo. You'll be able to take a look at it and copy it. That way, you can focus on the flower itself. There's no need to explain it too much here. Just pause the video and refer to the photo to help you with the drawing. But hey, if you've got a Christmas cactus at home, and if it's blooming, don't be lazy. Take a good look at the flowers and sketch them from life. Trust me, it's so much more rewarding and inspiring when you're drawing not just any flower, but your own. At least I find it super motivating. All right, the sketch is done, and now we can move on to colour. I'm using a palette directly on the drawing, which is really useful for seeing the colours next to each other. Plus, it also helps as a compositional element. In some Chinese paintings, you might find little colour swatches like this, or even hieroglyphs in this spot. But here, these tiny colour samples are helping to finish off the composition. They fill the space, add a focus, and balance out the pink and green tones. Now let's talk colours. For the flowers, I'm using carmine red. There's a synthetic bright pink which I've seen on sale. I haven't tried it on paper yet, but in general, carmine is more than enough. The trick here is working with contrasts. For instance, if we use a more muted or pale green, a bright pink will really pop against it. The key is the difference in intensity between the two. When the green is more subdued, the pink stands out. You can apply this principle anywhere, like using a simple sky blue for the sky, while making the ground or anything below it a bit less saturated. Next, I'm mixing carmine with violet. It's better to go with a light violet or pastel violet, not the dark. You can also mix in a little bit of blue for a cooler shade. For the greens, I'm mixing green with yellow ochre. This gives me that warm light green for the highlights and a darker, more shadowed green for the shaded parts. You can mix any yellow and a bit of brown to adjust the tone. Just avoid using pure dark green. Instead, use a regular dark green mixed with yellow ochre, or brown for a more muted tone. Finally, for the darker parts of the branches, I'm using a burgundy colour. If you don't have burgundy, you can make a similar colour by mixing carmine, violet and brown. This shade will be perfect for those inner parts of the branches. I'm painting on cellulose paper here, which has a tendency to absorb colour and make it a little dull. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it, but it works okay for this sketch. When working with cotton paper, the colours stay a bit brighter and more vivid. Alright, so here's what I'm doing. I'm using a technique where I start by adding a lot of water to the paint. I drop it into the shape of the petal. And, as you can see, when I tilt the brush left and right, the tip of the brush naturally creates those little jagged edges, those irregularities along the edge. The more water I use, the more it pushes the pigment to the edges, creating this soft boundary around the shape, almost like a contour. After that, I'll gently lift off some of the excess water from the middle of the petal. Then I add another big drop of water, and in the centre, I add a little violet stripe, and keep lifting and adding water to build up that volume. You'll see this in more detail when I work on the closer petals, but the key here is that by lifting the water, we can really show the volume of the petal. This creates that rounded, three-dimensional effect, especially where we have that dark burgundy violet centre. The big drop of water creates that crisp edge, because the most pigment naturally gathers along the edge of the wet spot. It's a really cool effect. Now, for the stem or branch, I'm making a smooth transition from the pink to the green in one wash. It's a bit light here, but I think it worked better in my first sketch, where the colours bled into each other more smoothly. On this one, the colours kind of settle and lose some of their vibrancy as it dries, and you lose some of that watercolour effect. It's a bit frustrating, but I've gotten used to it. I always start with the more distant elements, like this branch in the corner. Then, once you're more comfortable with the technique, you can move on to the more prominent parts, like the main flowers and branches. This helps your hand get used to the flow, and the painting feels more confident. Different papers handle paint differently, so it's always a bit of trial and error to get the feel for it. I use the same technique on the petals here, but with a little adjustment for each element. You'll see it all come together as we add more layers. Alright, let's talk about colour. By the time I finished painting the first flower, I opened a new tube, and now this flower is getting a fresh, clean colour. It's much brighter with more of a pinkish tone, really fresh. Now there are two main ways to create smooth transitions. You can go wet on wet, where you moisten the paper and add your paint while it's still wet. Or you can go dry and work with less water. Here we're doing both. I started with pink on the petals, then rinsed my brush, added a clean drop of water in the centre, and let it spread out. You can also wet the petal first, then add the pink around the edges. That works great too if it's more your style, but you can also do it dry. Just be sure to use less water. If your paper absorbs water slowly and spreads the colour nicely, you can totally go dry and gently pull the pigment out from the edges. The great thing about wet on wet is that it gives you this crisp, bright outline where the water helps push the colour outward. It naturally creates that perfect edge. But the downside is that the colour will end up lighter when it dries. For this flower, I don't need super intense colour, so that works out perfectly. Now, here's a quick tip. Sometimes I add colour in layers. I'll add a layer while the petal is still wet, then let it dry and go back for more. The colour always lightens as it dries. That's just how watercolour works. There's no such thing as paper that doesn't lighten when it dries. Once the petal dries and lightens, you can go back in and add a bit more intensity if you want. It's always tempting to go in with a bold colour right away, but it's good to take it slow. The paint will spread out and get lighter once it hits the paper, so it's better to build the intensity in stages. And if you're trying wet on wet, just remember, the paint will always move. It's like it has a mind of its own, spreading out and finding places to go. So, you might add colour in one spot, but it'll shift to somewhere else. But that's the beauty of it, the soft, flowing effect you get from the water and paint interacting. Atmospheric perspective isn't just for landscapes or distant mountains. It's a technique you can use even in small compositions to create depth. You might not always notice it, but if you look at professional photos, you'll see it all the time. Photographers often blur the background or reduce the contrast of less important elements to keep the focus on the main subject. It's the same idea here. Those distant petals should be a bit cooler and less defined, so they don't distract from the main flowers. Alright, moving on to the stamens and pistils. We'll actually define them more with the green leaves around them, but for now, we just need to add a hint of colour. A soft pink and a touch of yellow, maybe a bit of ochre, should do the trick. We're just suggesting their presence, not detailing them yet, so they don't stand out too much against the white. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you're enjoying it. You can find more of my art tutorials on my Patreon page, and any support through donations is greatly appreciated. You can find all the ways to support me in the description below. Alright, let's keep going. Now, back to the leaves. I'm using the same wet-on-wet technique here. This little branch with the bud is getting the most light, since my lamp is off to the right, not directly overhead. That means this branch is the brightest one, with the most yellow tones. The farther branches will only catch a bit of light on their right sides. Just to recap the technique. I start with a wet green base for the leaf, then gently blot the centre to remove some of the moisture. Next, I add a bit of burgundy in the middle, and if it spreads too much, I'll lift some of that colour to keep the edges clean. This creates that soft, glowing highlight along the sides. It's a simple algorithm. Soak the area, lift the centre, add the colour and clean up the edges. I recommend practicing this technique on a small scrap of paper first to see how your specific paper handles the moisture. You might find that you prefer a different approach, and that's totally fine. I use this method because it works well for me, but watercolor is all about experimenting and finding what feels right for your style. Now, painting the bud is basically the same process as painting the flower. Nothing too tricky here, just follow the same steps. And as for the leaves right under the flower, they're a bit more muted than that super bright green branch at the bottom. Here's a crucial tip. Use those dark green leaves to outline and define the flower petals. The contrast between the dark green and the bright white flower really makes the petals pop forward. So, take your time to carefully outline the flower's edges. That way, the green won't accidentally mess up the shape of your flower. By now, you're probably getting the hang of these petals. Your hands warmed up. You're more familiar with how the paper reacts to water and pigment. It's all coming together, right? One more quick composition tip. In my very first sketch, I left this awkward little white gap between two branches. It was this bright white triangle that stood out way too much, and it really disrupted the flow of the piece. You can actually still see it here, but I'm planning to fill it in to connect the branches and close up that space. When you're laying out your composition, keep an eye out for these accidental gaps. They can end up being distracting, pulling attention away from your main subject. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, go back and check the time-lapse of the first sketch. You'll see exactly what I mean under the top flower, between those two branches. Oh, and for that little bud in the background, keep it subtle, much softer and less intense than the main flower. It's just there to support the overall composition without stealing the spotlight. All right, now for the foreground. A great trick is to let one of the buds slightly hide behind a branch. If both buds are fully exposed, they'll end up competing with each other. But if one is peeking out from behind a branch, you get that sense of depth and layering. It's like you're creating a little world where one bud overlaps the branch, then another branch, and then another bud peeks out. Instant depth. Now for the distant flower at the bottom, keep it a bit lighter. It should be in the same colour family as the bud, but slightly more faded. We don't want it to be as bold and vibrant as the main flower on top. This helps it stay in the background and not steal the spotlight. And take your time with the stamens. Carefully outline them, keeping that clean, crisp look. They're a small detail, but they really add to the overall look of the flower. Okay, now you might have noticed that the top branch seems to appear out of nowhere. Don't worry, we're going to fix that. We'll add a faint, distant branch so it doesn't look like it's floating. Use a very diluted green, something light and transparent, almost like a shadow. This way, it won't overpower the main flower, but still hints at more branches in the background. Just use your instincts here. Look at your composition, see where there are empty spaces, and decide where those faint background branches should go. They're meant to fill out the scene without distracting from the main flowers. If your composition has more empty space, like mine does here, you can add a few more of these background branches. But if your layout is tighter, with flowers closer together, you might need fewer. It's all about balance. One last tip. The size of your paper really affects how many details you should add. On a larger canvas, you can make the branches and flowers bigger and more detailed. On a smaller canvas, keep it simple. Don't cram in too many elements, or it'll feel cluttered. And with that, we're almost done. Don't rush to fill in everything. Take a step back, look at your painting, and only add what really enhances it. All right, and that's it. I hope you give this technique a try. You can use the same approach to paint all kinds of flowering branches, apple blossoms, cherry trees, or any plant with lots of small clustered flowers. It's a great way to pick out a few key elements while still capturing the overall volume and shape of the plant. You can also use this technique in more complex compositions, like adding a blossoming branch in the foreground of a landscape painting. Imagine a bright green landscape with a flowering apple branch in the front. It creates such a beautiful layered effect, so don't be afraid to paint from life. Experiment, try different plants, and don't hesitate to share your work. I'd love to see what you come up with. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Happy painting and take care.